Let's stay on that story now. We're joined by David Monyae from the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. The late Essop Pahad was an honorary scholar and board member there. David, thank you so much for your time. We've heard a lot of reminding of the role that Essop Pahad played in especially those first 10, 15 years of South Africa's very young democracy, very close to President Thabo Mbeki, both when he was advisor to him as deputy president and then as minister in the presidency during the Mbeki presidency. But the interest and passion for international relations was always front and center. As seen also in that Pan-African quarterly magazine, The Thinker, that was a big passion project for him. Do you think we'd come to grips with the influence that he had on our outlook into Africa during those important political years?
Indeed, I think Dr. Essop Pahad played a critical role in terms of anti-apartheid, Africa's position in the global arena. But more importantly, he also brings in a dimension that is not spoken quite clearly in terms of solidarity with other, particularly communist organization, progressive, whether in former Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela, the Palestinian question. I think he has always, throughout his life, sensitive to the plight of the working class, women, people with disability, and children. And you can see, as a cabinet minister, he played a pioneer role in organizing the cabinet, as well as dealing with these specific issues, a very progressive role that it's sad that we lose him at this particular junction.
Can you give us a sense of your time working with him? What was the sense that you got about what drove him in terms of what he believed South Africa's positioning should be in Africa, the role it should play, and indeed the role that Africa should play in geopolitics, in world politics?
Dr. Essop Pahad also belonged to the Concern Africa Forum, which is part of most progressive Africans across the continent. And whenever there are issues, whether there's xenophobic attacks that took place in this country and other issues in terms of refugee crisis, the DRC crisis, I mean, he was in the forefront of mobilizing progressive voices, really to register petitions, write in the media, give analysis, as well as reaching out to other progressive forces internationally. So he never really rested, even though he had retired. He was always in the forefront doing that. But he was also a member of the board, the advisory board of the Center for Africa-China Studies at University of Johannesburg. And we are privileged to see him at work and to advance issues that we're seized with, particularly the Russia-Ukraine crisis and other, whether it was Iraq crisis, 2011, the Libya, unfortunate bombing of Libya by NATO. So he was always in the forefront, calling for a Pan-African position on all these issues.
I read somewhere that when he was still a member of the Transvaal Indian Youth Congress a long, long time ago, he was responsible for producing and distributing pamphlets. And that was back in the 1960s, as that was the way that messaging was brought across to those who they were trying to mobilize. And I get the feeling that that's where a passion for the power of the message and the power of the media came from, because he was also then later, he represented the SACP on the editorial council for the World Marxist Review. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the Pan-African quarterly magazine called The Thinker was a big passion project of him. This passion for the media and the role that it could play is something that followed him throughout his life, wasn't it?
He was a giant, an intellectual giant, and the ability to communicate well and forcefully, particularly on issues that principal issues of human rights, equality, on question of gender. He was straightforward, hard on those issues. And I think we all saw him at play in terms of as the minister and the presidents managing these specific issues. Even after cabinet position, a very humble person. And as an individual, he started his own magazine that played a critical role, and that magazine sits at University of Johannesburg, or the library, and it's an accredited journal as we speak. And I think all of this will come in his own autobiography, the book that is coming out quite soon, where the world will hear his own voice.
Are you hoping that the spotlight that's put on the work that he has done now will help with the work like organize a Center for Africa-China Studies? You know, when we talk about relations like Africa-China Studies, I feel that sometimes it gets lost in the headlines of the latest trade agreement or disagreements, as it were, and that those are relationships that actually go quite deep, and that's something that somebody like Essop Pahad would have believed in quite deeply. Are you hoping that the spotlight that is now being put on the work that he's done over the years will encourage those to take a deeper look at the issues and the history behind these current headlines that seem to change every couple of hours?
Oh, indeed. I think far beyond the Center for Africa-China Studies, the Concerned African Forum, the SACP, the party itself, particularly the youth, I think he led an exemplary life, a life that is principled, disciplined, and rigorous in terms of education, the love for education. These are some of issues that represent the men that we knew, and also the mere fact that he, on non-racialism, I think he was in the forefront. He's one particular person that when you are discussing with him, I mean, you don't feel the difference in terms of race. It was a non-issue, and therefore I think there is a need to go forward, unite the nation, as well as the continent and the progressive movements across the world that he loved so much.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for spending time with us this evening and sharing us your thoughts and memories of Essop Pahad. That's David Monyae from the Center for Africa-China Studies, joining us virtually from here in Johannesburg.